Right now, looking at everything happening in Philadelphia, the feeling is clear. The moment of truth has arrived. With every step this team takes toward Week 15, the pressure keeps climbing, and Lincoln Financial Field knows exactly what's at stake. The Eagles are hosting the Raiders, and let's be honest, this was never supposed to be the kind of game that keeps anyone up at night. It wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It wasn't supposed to make the fan base anxious, wondering which version of this team is going to show up. But here we are, after 2 straight losses as favorites, after weeks of ups and downs, after an offense that just hasn't found its rhythm, this matchup suddenly carries massive weight. Not because of the opponent, but because losing now would mean hitting the lowest point of the season. So get ready, because today we're diving deep into the story, breaking down what's truly on the line, and why this game might define the Eagles' future. And if you bleed green, go ahead and smash that like button to support the video, because from here on out, the energy only goes up. You look at this Raiders team and everything about them screams collapse. They've dropped 8 straight. Their offense is dead last in points per game, second to last in yards, and Geno Smith, who was already struggling, won't likely play. That puts Kenny Pickett in line to face his former team in bitter Philadelphia weather, and we know how that tends to go for quarterbacks with small hands trying to grip a frozen football. Las Vegas has no Chip Kelly calling plays anymore. Their offensive line is one of the worst in football, and their injuries have piled up. Outside of Brock Bowers, who is legitimately one of the most talented tight ends in the league already, and Max Crosby, who's a top-tier pass rusher, this roster is hanging together with tape. And yet, with everything pointing in Philadelphia's favor, there's that familiar hesitation from Eagles fans. Because this team hasn't given anybody a reason to feel comfortable. They've been touchdown favorites and lost. They've been expected to wake up and didn't. Their offense, supposed to be one of the most explosive in the league and definitely the highest paid, has been mediocre at best, downright bad at worst. They can't finish drives the way they used to. They can't convert third downs. And the most alarming part of it all is how tight and uncertain they look. The confidence that defined last year's Super Bowl run is nowhere to be found. The file makes one thing extremely clear. This is a get-right game for Philadelphia, and not just a win-and-move-on kind of game. They need style points. They need life. They need to go out there and remind themselves who they are. Because with 4 weeks left before the playoffs, there is still time to fix things, but only if they stop pressing and start executing. We saw flashes of hope against the Chargers. Even with the turnovers, even with the mistakes, there were signs of offensive creativity again. More pre-snap motion, more RPOs, more designed runs for Jalen Hurts. Moving the pocket, a better run-blocking scheme with wham blocks and double teams. Nick Sirianni getting more involved in the offensive planning seemed to help, and the difference was noticeable. But none of it matters if Hurts continues to turn the ball over like this. 7 giveaways in 2 games. 7. That's the same number he had in his previous 26 combined. And that's why this Raiders matchup becomes the ultimate mirror, because Hurts doesn't need to do anything superhuman. He just needs to play clean, structured football and trust the offense around him. Another storyline from the file that can't be ignored is how much the offense has leaned on A.J. Brown these past few weeks. His production has been elite, over 100 yards in each of the last 3 games, but it's come at the expense of DeVonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, 2 players who make this offense far more dangerous when they're involved. Force-feeding one star at the expense of the system has thrown the balance off, and that's part of why the Eagles feel stuck. They need to spread the ball again. They need rhythm, not desperation targets. And on top of all this, Lane Johnson's status hangs over the matchup. If he's back, the offensive line stabilizes. If he's not, Max Crosby becomes a real threat to disrupt the entire game. That's the kind of matchup that has turned comfortable afternoons into disasters before. And when you combine the cold weather, the stakes, the frustration, and the urgency, it becomes clear that every detail matters. So here we are, Eagles fans. A home game against the 2-win Raiders team that should be a layup. A matchup against a backup quarterback and a bottom-tier offense. A chance to regain momentum, confidence, and identity before it's too late. But do you trust this team right now? Do you really believe they'll handle business the way they should? Picking up right where we left off, this is the moment where everything the Eagles have been battling through, injuries, inconsistency, turnovers, shaky execution, pressure from the fan base, and their own internal frustrations, comes to a boiling point. Because stepping into the second half of this story, the truth is simple. The Eagles cannot afford to walk into this game acting like the Raiders are already beaten. That mindset has burned them twice. They were touchdown favorites against the Bears. Lost. They were favored against the Chargers. Lost. Nobody in Philadelphia is interested in hearing about betting lines or projections anymore. They want to see the product on the field match the talent on the roster. And that's where this becomes a test of character more than anything else. The file lays out, in detail, how this offense has fallen short of expectations. Even with elite players, even with the league's highest paid offensive unit, they are 19th in points per game, 24th in yards, and buried near the bottom of the league on third down. That doesn't happen overnight. It happens when confidence fades, when timing fades, when decision-making slips, when trust starts to crack. You can feel it watching them. They're pressing, trying to force big plays instead of letting the game flow naturally. But this matchup gives them an opportunity to breathe again. Because as bad as things have looked, the Raiders' defense is not the kind of unit that should threaten Philadelphia unless the Eagles beat themselves. Without an efficient offense on the other side, without consistent pressure beyond Max Crosby, without a strong secondary, Las Vegas is not built to survive long, grinding drives. If the Eagles simply avoid turnovers, the math is overwhelmingly in their favor. But simply hasn't been simple at all this season. That brings us back to Jalen Hurts. The file outlines his statistical drop-off since the bye week: completion percentage below 58%, more interceptions than touchdowns, fumbles piling up. But the deeper concern is his processing. Defenses are giving him disguised looks, rotating late, showing pressure and dropping off, and he hasn't looked comfortable reading it. That's not who he was last season. And while the coaching staff deserves its share of blame, Hurts has to regain the confidence and clarity that made him so dangerous. That starts with this game. No forcing throws into double coverage. No locking in on A.J. Brown. No drifting in the pocket. Just trust the structure, trust the reads, and trust the talent around you. And speaking of talent, the Eagles desperately need to reestablish the balance that made them great. DeVonta Smith cannot be an afterthought. Dallas Goedert cannot be an occasional option. This offense becomes predictable when it runs through one player. When all three weapons are involved, opposing defenses struggle. Everything opens up: run lanes, intermediate windows, shot plays. The file makes it clear, even though A.J. Brown's numbers are elite right now, the overall offense has regressed because of how forcefully the ball has been going his direction. That has to change immediately. But the biggest hidden factor in all of this is the offensive line, specifically Lane Johnson. If he plays, it changes everything. If he doesn't, Max Crosby becomes the most dangerous person in the building. Crosby doesn't take snaps off, doesn't give up on plays, and destroys offenses that aren't disciplined. If the Eagles want Hurts to be comfortable, if they want the run game to function, if they want play action to actually mean something, they need stability at right tackle. Without Lane, this becomes a completely different challenge. Still, even with all these concerns, the file does shine a light on the few things still working. The red zone offense, though not as dominant as earlier in the season, is still near the top of the league. When Philadelphia gets close, they usually cash in. And the red zone defense? Fourth in the NFL. Vic Fangio's system might bend up and down the field, but when it tightens, it holds strong. Those two factors alone can be enough to break a team like the Raiders, who already struggle to sustain drives. So as we head into the thick of the preview, the real question becomes whether this Eagles team is finally ready to reclaim its identity. Not the desperate, panic-driven version we saw the last few weeks. The version that plays fast, aggressive, balanced. The version that takes control early and forces weaker opponents to keep up. Because if they can't do that against a Raiders team falling apart on an 8-game losing streak, it's hard to imagine them flipping the switch with tougher opponents ahead. But maybe, just maybe, this is the week where everything settles, where the offense looks coordinated, where Hurts plays with conviction again, where the turnovers stop and the rhythm returns. Because the opportunity is right there. The stakes are obvious, and the path toward rebuilding momentum starts with one performance that reminds everyone watching why this team won a Super Bowl last season. Now I want to hear from you. After everything we've laid out, do you believe the Eagles will finally put together the complete performance they've been searching for? And do you think this is the turning point they desperately need? Picking up immediately from there, this is where the weight of the season settles onto the Eagles' shoulders. Because as much as this matchup is about correcting mistakes, it's also about proving that the standard in Philadelphia hasn't slipped beyond repair. For weeks now, fans have watched an offense that feels disconnected from the identity that carried this team to a championship. And the most glaring issue, the turnovers, has turned what should be routine drives into sudden disasters. The file lays it out in plain terms: 9 turnovers in the last 3 games. That's not just bad luck. That's a crisis. The offense hasn't been able to sustain rhythm because every time momentum begins to build, a fumble, a forced throw, or a miscommunication short-circuits everything. That's the kind of pattern that destroys a team's confidence from the inside. And yet, when you look closely at the structure of what the coaching staff attempted against the Chargers, there were signs of the old creativity trying to emerge. More pre-snap motion, more movement for Jalen Hurts, more effort to create defined reads. It's not fixed yet, not even close, but it's the first time in weeks that the offense looked like it was searching for solutions instead of repeating the same broken formula. And that's why this Raiders matchup matters far more than the standings suggest. It's not just about keeping playoff positioning. It's not about proving anything to the media. It's about proving to themselves that the progress they saw last week wasn't an illusion. Because if they take the field and look hesitant again, if they fall back into the mistakes that have defined this losing streak, then everything positive they pulled from the Chargers game evaporates. But the biggest shift Philadelphia needs is a mental one. The file makes this clear without even saying it directly. This team is playing tight, stressed, overthinking instead of reacting. When Hurts is confident, he attacks defenses. When DeVonta Smith is involved, everything becomes easier. When Saquon Barkley has lanes, the offense becomes multidimensional. All the pieces are there. They've been there all season long, but the belief hasn't matched the talent lately. And belief is the difference between a contender and a team just trying to survive. Defensively, the picture is clearer. The unit bends, gives up yards, frustrates the fan base, but it tightens in the red zone and makes key stops. Facing a Raiders offense that ranks near the bottom in every major category is exactly what this defense needs. But they can't allow Brock Bowers to dictate tempo. They can't allow Max Crosby to energize the Raiders sideline. They can't let a struggling team hang around and start believing they can steal one. Good teams bury opponents like this early. Great teams bury them and never look back. And the Eagles, right now, need to remind everybody, including themselves, which category they belong in. And maybe the most important part of this entire breakdown is what the file reveals about the stakes. The Eagles have kept the door cracked for Dallas. Fans know it. Players know it. The coaching staff definitely knows it. And even though Philadelphia still sits in the driver's seat for the division, they are one bad performance away from letting the Cowboys jump right back into the picture. That's what makes this Raiders game feel so critical. It's not the opponent, it's the timing. It's the momentum. It's the perception. It's what comes next. Because if the Eagles do what they're supposed to do, if they dominate, control the game, and finally play a clean brand of football, then everything opens back up. Confidence rises. Pressure lifts. The final stretch of the season starts to look manageable again. The narrative shifts from collapse to resurgence. But if they stumble, if they let Kenny Pickett, cold weather, and a 2-win Raiders team make this a contest, then the conversation around this team changes completely, and not in a way anyone in Philadelphia wants to hear. This is the moment where we find out if the Eagles still have the championship focus that defined them. Do they tighten up and hesitate again? Or do they walk into the link with a sense of purpose and remind everyone why this roster was built to repeat? Picking up exactly from that moment, the truth is this. If the Eagles want to rewrite the direction of their season, the Raiders game isn't just an opportunity, it's a responsibility. Everything about the matchup demands a response, not just a result. And that's why the pressure around this team feels heavier than usual. Fans aren't asking for miracles. They're not asking for 50-point blowouts or highlight reel trick plays. They're asking for one thing, a team that looks like it knows who it is again. Because when you sift through every detail of this file, one theme keeps rising to the surface: identity. Last season, the Eagles didn't just win games, they controlled them. They dictated pace. They dictated matchups. They dictated momentum. And when something went wrong, they didn't panic. This year, every mistake feels like it triggers a cascade of doubt. One turnover becomes a second. One stalled drive becomes 3. One miscommunication becomes an entire quarter of confusion. It's not physical, it's mental. And the only way out of that kind of slump is to punch your way out of it on the field. And this matchup offers the perfect way to do it. The Raiders are spiraling, their offense is broken, their quarterback situation is a mess, and their coaching situation has been unstable all season. But the danger of a team like that is simple. They have nothing to lose. Teams with nothing to lose play loose, take risks, and feed off any sign of hesitation from their opponent. And that's exactly why the Eagles can't afford to start slow. They can't let the Raiders hang around for 2 quarters. They can't let Max Crosby create chaos. They can't let Brock Bowers find early rhythm. Because if that happens, everything that should make this game predictable becomes fragile. What the Eagles need is a start that sets the tone: long, balanced drives, clean execution, high percentage throws, and a defense that forces Kenny Pickett into uncomfortable decisions. They need the offensive line to create push early. They need Jalen Hurts to settle in without forcing the ball to A.J. Brown. They need DeVonta Smith involved in the first quarter. They need Dallas Goedert to become the safety valve he's always been. And they need Saquon Barkley to get touches that aren't blown up before they even begin. Most importantly, they need to trust the structure. Because when you break down the film and the notes in this file, it's obvious that the system isn't the issue, it's the execution. When the Eagles ran more motion, more RPO looks, more designed movement, the offense looked alive again. When they stopped trying to play hero ball and instead leaned into rhythm, tempo, and timing, everything opened up. If they build on that instead of shrinking back into conservative, predictable play calling, this game becomes a launching point rather than another warning sign. Defensively, Fangio's group should have the advantage across the board. The Raiders' offensive line is overmatched. Their run game has been non-existent. Their quarterbacks have struggled all season. But even then, the Eagles can't simply rely on breakdowns. They need impact. They need sacks, forced throws, tipped balls, early stops. They need momentum plays that give the offense short fields. Because nothing builds confidence faster than when both sides of the ball start feeding off each other. And in a strange way, this game has become the perfect mirror for the Eagles' season. If they dominate, it tells you they're finally waking up, finally responding, finally accepting the urgency of the moment. If they struggle, it reveals that the problems go deeper than execution, that the confidence and chemistry issues are real and growing. And fans don't need numbers or analysis to sense that. They feel it. They've seen the patterns. They know what a sleepwalking team looks like. But they also know what this roster is capable of when everything clicks. They've seen this team lift trophies. They've seen Jalen Hurts take over games. They've seen DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown overwhelm secondaries. They've seen this offensive line flatten defensive fronts. They've seen this defense suffocate opponents in big moments. All of that is still in there. None of it disappeared. It just needs to be found again, and this game is the chance to rediscover it. So before we wrap this up, let me leave you with this. The Raiders aren't the opponent the Eagles need to fear. The Eagles need to fear becoming a team that forgets what it's capable of. And if there was ever a week to remind themselves, and the rest of the league, this is it. Defensively, Fangio's group should have the advantage across the board. The Raiders' offensive line is overmatched. Their run game has been non-existent. Their quarterbacks have struggled all season. But even then, the Eagles can't simply rely on breakdowns. They need impact. They need sacks, forced throws, tipped balls, early stops. They need momentum plays that give the offense short fields. Because nothing builds confidence faster than when both sides of the ball start feeding off each other. And in a strange way, this game has become the perfect mirror for the Eagles' season. If they dominate, it tells you they're finally waking up, finally responding, finally accepting the urgency of the moment. If they struggle, it reveals that the problems go deeper than execution, that the confidence and chemistry issues are real and growing. And fans don't need numbers or analysis to sense that. They feel it. They've seen the patterns. They know what a sleepwalking team looks like. But they also know what this roster is capable of when everything clicks. They've seen this team lift trophies. They've seen Jalen Hurts take over games. They've seen DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown overwhelm secondaries. They've seen this offensive line flatten defensive fronts. They've seen this defense suffocate opponents in big moments. All of that is still in there. None of it disappeared. It just needs to be found again, and this game is the chance to rediscover it. So before we wrap this up, let me leave you with this. The Raiders aren't the opponent the Eagles need to fear. The Eagles need to fear becoming a team that forgets what it's capable of. And if there was ever a week to remind themselves, and the rest of the league, this is it. But they also know what this roster is capable of when everything clicks. They've seen this team lift trophies. They've seen Jalen Hurts take over games.